We have loved a sentence we have not yet heard. My grace is sufficient. We tucked it in our pocket like a charm. We whispered it before interviews, surgeries, meetings, and reconciliations, as if to say, God, help me do what I already know I must do. Add your strength to mine. And there begins the trouble. For grace is not the divine crutch for a determined ego. Grace is not a supplement, not an energy drink for the personal sense. Grace is what remains when the personal sense is not propped up at all. Grace appears when the scaffolding of self-assertion is taken down. Grace stands when you stop standing for yourself.
Would you like to use God to prop up the personal sense? Or would you like to know God? That is the governing question. It is the question that divides religion from realization. If you would use God, then every prayer becomes a lasso thrown at heaven to pull down a little more power to carry out your plan. But if you would know God, you will not ask power to do your will. You will rest until God is realized, and in that realization, discover that sufficiency is not added. Sufficiency is. God is. I am. This is sufficient. We've been taught to hear that verse as a motivational phrase, a slogan for the strong. Buck up, carry on. God will help you finish. But it is not outer encouragement. It is inward instruction. It does not speak to your will. It speaks to your consciousness. My grace is sufficient is not a promise written out there. It is a state of awareness recognized in here. It does not invite you to push through. It invites you to lay down. It does not offer future relief. It reveals present sufficiency. Is the word. The two miracle words in this way are is and am. Not shall be. Not when the check clears, when the pain recedes, when the apology arrives. Now, when resistance is surrendered, sufficiency is discovered. Do you see the reversal? As long as the personal strength insists, grace waits. As long as the human mind manages, calculates, tightens its jaw and squares its shoulders, grace stands outside the closed door saying, "When you are finished, I am." The personal sense wants to add God to its momentum. Grace removes the momentum and leaves God. You, without the burden of personal doingness, find that life lives itself. Seek ye the kingdom of God, and these things shall be added. Not earned, not engineered, added as the natural outflow of realized presence. This is provocation, only if you are still in love with your own strength. But it is consolation if you are weary. For you need not climb higher to qualify. You need only cease climbing to see. In the stillness, sufficiency announces itself. God is, and that is enough. Paul learned this not from a lecture, but from the ache that would not yield to his sincerity. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, he says, a messenger to buffet me. 3 times he besought the Lord that it might depart. 3 times a very honest man prayed a very honest prayer for a very honest reason. And then, without the least adjustment of the outer condition, a voice, present, immediate, not promising a future, but declaring an is, answered, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Notice it. No instruction for a technique, no timetable, no bargaining. A law announced. A correction given. Would you like to see the subtlety of the personal sense? The plea was not for the sake of God. It was for the sake of the worker. Let me be rid of this thorn, so I may proceed with my ministry, so I may be effective, so I may show forth success. Beautiful, sincere, and still the I is the actor, and God is asked to underwrite the performance. That is petitionary prayer in its most religious form. Bless what I am doing. But the answer turned the man from doing to being, from managing to yielding. My grace is sufficient. It does not say, I will make you sufficient. It reveals sufficiency as the ever-present nature of God, known as you stop directing God and let God be God. This is the discomfort we try to avoid. You can be earnest and still miss the point if you are outcome-seeking. You can cry out 3 times, and yet the cry itself keeps center stage. The ego loves to be spiritual. The ego loves to be efficient, to testify, to demonstrate, provided it remains the demonstrator. But grace will not be harnessed to that yoke. Grace is not a sentiment sent to console the brave. It is the divine order insisting upon itself. Law is. My strength is made perfect in weakness does not mean that God will turbocharge your human will. It means that as the self-assertive sense grows weak, as its plans and petitions fall to the floor, the power that always is may be seen as all. Then the apostle can say, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Rest, not strain. The power rests upon the transparency that has ceased to project its own program. Would you like to instruct God how best to heal? Or would you like to know God? I tell you, it presents a God you can ask nothing of. Not because God withholds, but because there is nothing to add to infinity and nothing to remove from wholeness. The thorn did not move. The center of identity moved. Petition ended. Realization began. From that hour, the prayer changes. The only permitted prayer is not for rearrangement, but for realization. God is. I am. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things, now. When the future collapses and the managing mind sinks, the law that was always operative becomes consciously known. And that knowing is the end of pleading and the beginning of power. Now the whole of it can be reduced to 2 words. And if you will not forget them, you will find yourself standing where Paul stood when the pleading ceased. God is. I am. That is not poetry. That is practice. That is not a slogan. That is revelation in workable form. These 2 words are the axis on which prayer turns from asking to awareness, from staging a future to consenting to now. God is. What do I mean by that? I mean there is an ever-operative presence, impersonal love, divine law functioning without our advice, without our calendar. God is not a deity to be roused from indifference by eloquence. God is not a power that waits to be summoned when danger approaches. God is. This minute, this place, without process, without degrees, without improvement. You cannot hasten God, delay God, or instruct God. You can only awaken to God. And awakening has no future tense. It is the recognition of what is already the case, already the life, already the law beneath appearances. I am. Not the little I that worries, ages, computes, or resents. Not the I that the senses report in pleasure today and in pain tomorrow. I am is identity in spirit, the Son of the living God, the Christ I within you. I and the Father are one, now. Not shall be when the bank account mends, when the diagnosis reverses, when the apology arrives. I am. The moment you consent to that identity, you are no longer trying to strap God onto a frightened self. The frightened self yields, and the presence announces itself as your very being. Suffering lengthens time. Have you noticed it? The mind under pressure manufactures futures. Someday I'll be okay. When this lifts. If that changes. The problem becomes the clock, and you live in a not yet, a wilderness of postponement. Grace interrupts that hypnosis with a single syllable. Is. Not God will, not I will. God is. I am. And in that instant, before a single cell alters, before a ledger shifts, before a phone call comes, sufficiency is discovered. Peace, not manufactured, but uncovered. Assurance, not argued for, but found. The outer may for a season remain as it is, but you are not as you were. Because your center is no longer a personal actor with a project. Your center is the indwelling that never began and cannot end. Take this into the next breath. Do not reach out, relax back. God is. Feel the weight drop from the future you were carrying. I am. Let the mask of roles and fears slide off and rest in the identity that predates your problem and survives your remedy. Here, in the unargued now, grace is tangible, not as sentiment, but as government. You as transparency, are sufficient because sufficiency is living itself as you. Now we must face the thing that looks like our ally and proves to be our obstacle. Strength. By strength, I do not mean the quiet capacity of spirit. I mean the personal sense that imagines itself separate and then undertakes to run a universe. Willpower that manipulates, virtue that tallies merits, religious effort that accumulates points with heaven. That I that rises early to improve itself, that studies to be approved, that fasts to be rewarded, that prays to be supplied. That is the strength that cannot receive grace, because it has already appointed itself the owner, the director, the decider. It wants God as endorsement, not God as life. Do you see the paradox? The stronger the personal sense grows, the more it treats God as a resource, a battery pack, an emergency service. It says, when I am weak, I will get more God. When I am strong, I will use less. It plugs into omnipotence the way a contractor plugs a tool into a socket, and then congratulates itself on the job well done. That is why my grace is sufficient feels like a slogan for the industrious. The self-sufficient self hears sufficient and thinks, good, enough to finish my plan. But grace is not an assist to a plan. Grace is the end of planning in the personal sense. Grace is God being God without your management. We have read the texts through old bottles. Achievement, deserving, control. And we have colored them with our school of effort. Seek ye the kingdom becomes a contest we can win. Ask and ye shall receive becomes leverage on a reluctant deity. Even Paul's surrender is recast as a technique to get past a thorn so we may resume our admirable performance. All the while the wine is new and the bottle is old. The words are holy, the ears are managing. We are sincere, yes, but sincerity in the service of control is still control. It is not wicked, It is merely ineffective in the things of spirit. Then our spiritual vocabulary turns to costume. We say faith, but we mean force, an inner gritting of the teeth to bend conditions to our preference. We say prayer, but we mean bargain. If I do this, God will do that. We tithe to transact. We fast to bribe. We affirm to coerce. Would you like to instruct God, or would you like to know God? It presents a God you can ask nothing of, not because God is hard, but because infinity cannot be contracted into your contract. Desire, except the desire to know God, is sin because it places effects before cause. The only permitted prayer is, reveal thyself. God is, I am. Here's the correction, and let it console you even as it corrects. Human strength blocks grace because it insists on earning, directing, or controlling what can only be yielded into. Power is made perfect in weakness because weakness is the moment the personal manager goes off duty and the presence is free to be itself as your very being. Sufficiency is not added to the personal sense. Sufficiency replaces the personal sense. Not, God, come help me be me, but Father, I yield, live thy life. And when that yielding is honest, without agenda, without timetable, you will discover that grace is not a supplement to strain. Grace is the government that ends strain. God is, I am, and that is enough. Power is made perfect in weakness. Do not sentimentalize those words. They do not make a virtue of frailty. They are not an invitation to cultivate incapacity or to glorify suffering. They announce a law, that the arm of flesh has no place in the operations of spirit, and that when reliance upon that arm ceases, the power that is already God becomes fully apparent. Weakness, in this sense, is not a flaw. It is the end of self-reliance. It is the moment the personal manager lays down his tools and the presence is free to be itself. There is a difference between resignation and surrender. Resignation says, I am stuck. Nothing can be done. It accepts a universe of two powers and chooses to live under the heavier one with a brave face. Surrender says, I release personal control into divine government. It refuses the hypnotism of appearances without fighting them. It does not slump. It yields. It does not withdraw from life. It stops trying to run life. One is a defeated I, enduring fate. The other is a transparent I, consenting to God. Don't you see? The moment you stop fighting to be strong, you become receptive. And receptivity is the womb of grace. Made perfect. Hear that word as completion, not as improvement. Power is not perfected by adding more voltage to your will. It is perfected, completed, brought through unobstructed, when there is nothing personal left to advise, to earn, to direct. As long as a private agenda hums beneath the prayer, the circuit is noisy. As long as the foreman within insists on supervision, the work stops. But when the foreman goes off duty, the work that was always God's proceeds in silence and certainty. Then the power of Christ rests. Rests because there is nothing left to resist it. Now we come to your ache. You say, this hardship, this lack, this diagnosis, this loneliness proves I have been forsaken. No. It may be the very crack through which the light enters, because the splendid scaffolding has fallen. The letter has failed. The technique has tired you. The heroics have run out. And in that quiet wreckage, something soft says, be still. Not a punishment, a permission. The personal storm winds are down, and the sea under them is calm, and that calm is God already governing. God is. I am. Let us be honest. The personal sense would rather be strong than be surrendered. It would rather boast of overcoming than become transparent to a power it cannot take credit for. But this is the subtle idolatry of strength. It asks God to decorate the ego with victories. Weakness, this holy ending of self-assertion, removes the idol and leaves only God. And then sufficiency is not achieved, it is realized. You discover that your place is not at the wheel, but as the transparency through which the wheel turns. So when the next surge of self-effort rises, pause. Ask, am I bracing or am I yielding? Am I resigning in despair or am I surrendering into presence? If you will stop wrestling to be strong and stand still in is and am, you will feel the quiet takeover of divine government. You will know why the apostle could glory in infirmities, not because he preferred pain, but because he had found the door where the person ends and the Christ begins. And beyond that door, power needs no improving. It is complete. Now, if weakness is the doorway, we must learn what stands in that doorway disguised as power. Appearance. The world you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell is a report coming through a mind educated in good and evil. It is not the country of God. It is the hypnosis about God's country. My kingdom is not of this world. The drama of better and worse, sick and well, rich and poor, saint and sinner. This dualism is the trance. When you grant it final authority, you kneel to the dream and call it law. When you begin to see it as mesmerism, nothing in and of itself, you stop becoming its victim and you stand where grace can reveal itself. Here is our power test, and I give it to you to end the wrestling. If you can see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, or smell it, it has no power in spirit. None. Don't you see? Sense testimony is not reality. It is a changing picture on the screen of time. When you fight the picture, you thicken the trance. You bind yourself to the very image you wish to erase by confessing, you are power. These names, cancer, deficit, betrayal, war, are decoys. They demand your fear or your fury so that you will feed them with belief. But truth requires neither fear nor fury. Truth is. God is. And in the presence of realized is, the picture loses authority. Resist not evil is not passivity toward injustice. It is refusal to arm the appearance with your belief. To fight a symptom, a lack, a person, a circumstance, is to accept its claim of reality and then battle at its level. You cannot win there because you have already conceded two powers. The work is not to fix. The work is to behold. To behold what? God is. I am. Behold the one presence and the one power, and abide there until inner assurance dawns. Not an emotion, not a self-hypnotized calm, but that quiet click within. It is I. Be not afraid. When that assurance appears, you will notice that the fear is gone, and with it, the authority you had lent to the picture. Then the picture either dissolves or becomes harmless. The sting is removed because you no longer bow. Grace is not the human mind overpowering conditions. It is the activity of truth revealing the nothingness of error. Nothingness. You cannot improve a mirage. you can only stop running toward the water. In the same way, you cannot add holiness to the hypnotism of sense, you can only wake from it. That waking is realization. It is not a doing, it is a dawning. You could sit 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and never mention the problem, never push, never plead, simply rest in is and am, until the weight lifts without explanation. That lifting is grace operating. That is divine government asserting itself in and as your awareness. So when the next appearance shouts its name, do not debate it. Do not announce its history. Do not marshal counter-arguments. Turn. Turn within. Father, reveal thyself. Sit and behold. Let the senses report what they will. Let the world measure what it must. You do not live by reports. You live by realization. And as you rest there, God is, I am. You will discover that you have stopped granting appearances ultimate authority, and grace, unresisted, does what grace always does: governs, corrects, harmonizes, and proves itself sufficient. Meditation is our opening wedge to the kingdom of God. But hear me, meditation as a means to an end is no meditation at all. If you go into the silence to get a healing, to get supply, to change a condition, you have carried the very barrier with you, the personal manager with its clipboard of needs. That keeps you outside, taking thought. The object of meditation is not results. The object of meditation is God. The only permitted prayer is a realization of God. Everything else is bargaining with shadows. Desire is the fork in the road. Desire for things is bondage because it assumes separation from the source and then labors to collect effects. Desire for God is prayer because it turns consciousness from effects to cause and lets cause reveal itself. Would you like to inform God what He ought to be doing, or would you like to know God? It presents a God you can ask nothing of, not because God withholds, but because infinity is already itself. When you seek God for God, you are no longer asking life to decorate a dream. You are waking from the dream into life. Now the practice, and keep it simple. Sit. No posture qualifies you. Sincerity does. Close the door of the senses. Turn off the parade of reports, and, for this span, lay the problem at the threshold. You do not bring the hospital chart or the ledger into the sanctuary. Let the name God be enough. God is. I am. Not words to hypnotize, but the two miracle words that anchor you in what is. If thoughts rise about symptoms, people, plans, do not wrestle. Do not complete the sentence. Let them pass. Return softly. God is. I am. Wait. Not for a sign. Wait in is. This is not a doing. It is a consenting. Begin and end the day this way, and pause through the day for brief acknowledgments. Half a minute, to remember is and am. Frequent, unstrained openings are better than long vigils burdened with agenda. No one can do this for you. Not a teacher, not a book, not even the memory of yesterday's light. This minute is the meeting place. What should you expect? Not fireworks. Often grace announces itself as a quiet shift you only notice after the sitting. The fear is gone. The pressure has lifted. The compulsion to manage has lost its grip. Sometimes a line arises. It is I, be not afraid. and the heart knows. Sometimes there is guidance without argument, a gentle nudge to call, to go, to be still. Sometimes there is only stillness, and that stillness is the government of God, moving without noise. If you find yourself using the silence to push on a condition, stop and confess. Father, reveal thyself. That is all. Refuse to measure the meditation by what happens next. Refuse to peek at the outer picture for proof. Abide, and let proof take care of itself. For when the personal sense rests and present tense realization dawns, God is, I am. Grace, unasked and unforced, touches consciousness. And when grace touches consciousness, it governs, it loves, it harmonizes. It proves sufficiency not by adding strength to you, but by being itself as you. Grace as sufficiency is not a quantity. It is a government. Sufficient means there is an order already functioning, a law already active, a love already directing the details of a life that is not yours to engineer. Sufficiency is what appears where outlining stops. When the personal sense ceases drawing blueprints, how the body must feel by Thursday, how the conversation must go at noon, how the bill must be met by month's end. The invisible but present government of God steps from background to foreground, not because it was missing, but because the noise of management has been quieted. This meets us where the personal sense breaks down. The chronic pain that did not yield to better diets and stronger affirmations. The relationship that has cycled through dialogue, silence, bargains, and ultimatums. The ledger with its sober math. The empty chair at the table. The burnout that no weekend can cure. There comes a point where willpower cannot lift another ounce. Good. That is the opening. At the edge of your devising, government can be felt. Not a rescue squad arriving from distance, but a presence you have unknowingly resisted by trying to be its substitute. In crisis, take the stance the Master gave. Of mine own self, I can do nothing. Say it, not as dejection, but as door opening. Then, softly, the two miracle words. God is, I am. Do not rush to fix. Do not pick up the tools you just set down. Stand under government. Wait in is. This is not passivity. It is authority without self-assertion. From that stillness, action will come, clean, unhurried, unafraid. A phone call made without rehearsed speeches. A no spoken without hostility. A yes that costs nothing of your peace. An appointment kept. A rest taken. Bread shared. Steps appear one at a time, as if placed under your feet by a mind that sees the whole and asks you only for the next. Would you like to run the universe for 5 more minutes? Or would you like to be carried by its law? When government is felt, the same circumstance loses its terror, because it has lost its autonomy. The body is no longer a tyrant. It is a servant of life. The other person is no longer an obstacle. They are a neighbor under the same grace. The ledger is no longer a verdict. It is a temporary report inside an order that adds by ways you do not foresee. Grief ceases to be a darkness you fight and becomes a silence in which comforter is known. Burnout stops accusing and starts instructing. Cease from thine own works. Do not confuse non-resistance with inertia. Panic reacts. Government moves. Reaction pushes to relieve tension. Government expresses form to reveal harmony. The outer act may be the same. A visit, a conversation, a budget, a treatment. But the inner origin is different. One proceeds from fear's calendar, the other unfolds from presence. And the fruit tells on it. Ease where there had been strain. Sufficiency where there had been lack. Right timing where there had been hurry. My grace is sufficient translates as, my order is operative. Let it order you. Then the thorn ceases to be an enemy and becomes an instructor. It points, unerringly, to where you were still the foreman. Each prick says, release here. Each ache says, stop outlining. Each delay says, live in is. And as you obey, not by improving appearances but by yielding identity, government becomes a climate rather than an episode, a way of being rather than a remedy. God is, I am. Under that government, life is lived, not managed, and sufficiency proves itself by governing what you had tried so long to control.
Supply, then, is not what comes to you. Supply is what flows out from you when love is realized. Love is supply, not the love that arrives on your doorstep to flatter you, but the love that goes out from you as forgiveness, as service, as cooperation, as quiet goodwill in the smallest transactions of a day. Under government, this outflow is not a program. It is your nature uncovered. It is the river finding its bed because the stones of self-importance have been lifted. Paul's weakness was not a badge of honor. It was the space through which love could move without contention. When the urge to be notable, to be efficient, to be approved collapsed, humility came in. Not the posture of inferiority, but the recognition of source. And where humility is, love has room. Don't you see? When the private actor retires, there is less me to protect and more presence to pour. The result is not a grim nobility. It is a gentle generosity, a willingness to be spent by love without keeping ledgers. Now, examine motive. Giving to get is the old traffic, a spiritualized commerce in which you seed gifts to reap dividends. That is not grace. That is bargaining with appearances and calling it faith. Giving because love is, that is grace in action. No calculation, no, and then I'll receive. The only arithmetic is oneness. God is, therefore I am, therefore love is my life, and its nature is outflow. Would you like to do business with God, or would you like to know God? If you will know God, love will do the business without consulting your profit and loss. How does sufficiency appear? Often is the next right step, the right person, the right timing, without the mind's scaffolding. Under realized love, an introduction arrives that no networking could have engineered. A tool is offered just when the need would have pressed. A schedule rearranges itself. A word spoken in simplicity opens a door that had been locked by debate. You did not outline it. You did not push. You abided, and then you moved from that abiding. And the fruit tells on it. Ease, appropriateness, harmony. Bread cast upon the waters returns, not because you aimed it at a return address, but because love's circulation is law. Anchor this in certainty. When God is realized as love, lack loses its authority before a single figure changes. The ache of not enough dissolves in the felt fullness of is. Gratitude precedes the package. Peace arrives before the remedy. Then you discover how rich you already are in what you can pour. A listening ear, a competent hour, a clear word, a lifted burden, a shared table, a generous silence that refuses gossip.
Start there. Pour there. As you do, channels widen, not as reward, but as the natural pressure of love seeking expression. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Let that be your commerce. Live as outflow, and watch harmony appear, unforced, as the world's way of acknowledging that God has been allowed to be God through you. God is, I am, love is, and sufficiency, seen as harmony, is the echo. Now let us make it practical. For 30 days, live in is, not as an experiment to get results, but as a consecration to God alone. First, set aside 2 periods each day, upon waking and before sleep, for meditation that asks nothing. Sit. Close the door of the senses. Lay every outline at the threshold. Let the only prayer be, Father, reveal thyself. Rest in the 2 miracle words, God is, I am. If thoughts of healing, supply, or persons arise, do not argue. Let them pass like clouds. Return to is and am until the inner click of assurance whispers, It is I, be not afraid. If it does not come, do not chase it. Your faithfulness is the prayer. God's self-revelation is the grace. Second, sprinkle the day with brief pauses. 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. Whenever you pass a doorway, pick up a phone, step into a car, open an email. Stop inwardly and acknowledge, God is, I am. These pauses are not for refueling your project. They are for relinquishing the project and consenting to government. You are not inserting God into the day. You are remembering that the day lives itself in God. Third, practice watchfulness. Notice when the mind slips back into future tense. When this is over. After I fix that. If only they would. And catch the bargaining, the rehearsals, the private treaties with fear. Smile at it. Call it what it is. The personal manager returning to its desk. Then, gently, take the desk away. God is, I am, here, now. Watch for the subtle outlining that dresses itself as virtue. I will do more, give more, prove more. Virtue that earns is still self. Release it. Consent to be transparent. Fourth, adopt the corrective sequence for hardship. The moment pressure mounts, stop. Put down the tool you have just reached for. Acknowledge weakness, not as failure, but as doorway. Of mine own self I can do nothing. Release the picture. Refuse to rehearse names, dates, and outcomes. Rest in is. God is. I am. Wait, listening, without drafting instructions. When guidance rises, often as a simple next step, act, but only when led. No haste, no heroics. Authority without assertion. Fifth, let love prove itself by outflow. Each day, one concrete act with no return address. A quiet forgiveness you do not announce. A listening ear without opinion. An errand run for one who cannot repay. An anonymous gift. A withheld criticism. A word of gratitude spoken promptly. Not to do good, but because love is your nature uncovered. Do not tally. Do not peek to see what comes back. Love is supply. Its circulation is law. At the end of 30 days, you will not have added God to a weary life. You will have yielded a weary life to God. The strain will have loosened, not by force, but by government. You will find that decisions are simpler, timing kinder, relationships softer, And even the thorns become signposts that say, "Release here." No teacher can do this for you. Not even Jesus Christ can stand in your stead in the sanctum of your own heart. And no outer circumstance can do it to you. For grace is not out there. Grace is the presence realized here. Begin now. God is. I am. Live there, and let sufficiency take over where your strength ends.